This is episode number 7 with Aadam Ali. Welcome to the Grow Podcast with myself, David O'Connor, where my goal is to interview world-class guests so you can constantly progress as a person in terms of your training, your mindset and nutrition. So without further ado, let's dive in. How are we keeping, guys? And a big welcome back to the Grow Podcast. And today I have Aadam Ali on the show, and basically I came across Aadam about a year ago, and straight away I was taken in by his kind of no bullshit approach, and obviously the quality of information he puts out there. Because I think you know by now, by listening to this podcast and kind of following any kind of, we'll say, fitness people in general, is you know yourself. There's a lot of shit out there, and it's very, very hard to distinguish kind of like the quality of some stuff that people put out, like what's actually, let's say, true, and what can you relate to, and what can you pop into your lifestyle to make things better for you when you can progress with your training, your nutrition, and your mindset stuff. So that is exactly what we get into today. Like, Aadam is an online kind of physique-based coach as well, and we're going to talk about stuff around kind of adversity and fat loss and how to overcome those things, we'll say. What motivation really is and what it's not, and Aadam's viewpoints in this are fucking brilliant, to say the least. And then we dive into mainly kind of why you're not losing fat and what to do about that. So let's get straight into it. Aadam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on, man.
No problem, buddy. And I know we're not going to beat around the bush with this, Aadam. You don't like bios. I'm going to make that clear for the listeners. But I do like to create a bit of context around who I have on and what we're going to chat about. So, super fast, I suppose. If people want to find out more about you, the link will be in the show notes for that. But in 10 seconds or less, Aadam, what do you do?
So if I was to too long, didn't read my life. Basically, I grew up a fat kid, had a crush on this guy in high school, thought that, asked her out, she rejected me, got pissed off, went and lost weight, got the girl, she broke up with me, and then life moved on, and I just got into this whole personal training thing, obviously everything that I'd learned, kept training because I ended up loving it, and now I'm here,
cool. Writing
stuff on the internet.
So I'm gonna ask you that again, because I think we kind of bypassed it a bit. What would you say you do though then in 10 seconds or less?
So I basically, I write a lot of fitness content on the internet, and I coach people, with the goal of sort of changing their body composition, so fat loss, muscle gain, but the thing with me is I'm really interested in more of the psychology, so why people do certain things, and that's why when you read a lot of my content, a lot of it is, there's an undertone of like philosophy as well, and psychology alongside the whole nutrition and training side of things as well.
Nice, yeah. And I, just before we went live as well, I told you like that's the reason why I kind of think I resonated with you so much, and even just, that was just from following you on Instagram, because I noticed a lot of like the philosophy style meditational stuff, kind of not meditation stuff, but meditations on physiconomics, as you say. But I kind of noticed that coming out in posts and even on Instagram alone, without reading your blogs too much in depth first. So I love that, because I'm fucking big on that as well down here, and it's a lot of behind the coaching aspect of what we do here as well. Like, it's all well and good having the knowledge behind getting shredded, building muscle, whatever it is, but if you can't make those things stick and get people a better outlook on things, you're probably pissing against the wind, really, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's also just because I feel that a lot of what people like the Stoics spoke about in terms of like overcoming adversity, the virtue in sort of overcoming challenges, overcoming adversity, even is what a lot of people are going to be going through when they go through a fat loss transformation, or even, if they're trying to put on muscle, whatever the case is. So I just find it very apt for what people are looking to do in terms of like changing their body or changing their health. I find that a lot of what people spoke about, sort of centuries ago in terms of like having discipline for it, understanding that failure will happen and how to deal with that. It's a message which I feel that is very relevant to the fitness industry. And And that's exactly why because I've been reading a lot of like Marcus Aurelius Meditations and, Seneca, Letters from a Stoic and Epictetus, all these guys, I've been reading them since I was like 18, 19. So, and then obviously as I was, in the fitness industry, the more I started learning about it, the more I sort of found parallels. And then I just began, thinking about how a lot of what they said in terms of like overcoming challenges, knowing that life isn't gonna always go the way that you plan it, and how to deal with those situations so that you don't, end up in this like depressed, sort of stressed out state where you just end up doing more harm to yourself than good. So, so I think it's definitely something that obviously we'll expand on when we talk today. But I definitely feel like they go hand in hand. There's a very strong parallel between sort of the philosophy, the psychology, and training nutrition as well.
Yeah, and even sometimes, like if I put out a video myself or a blog, and it's kind of related more to like people can relate to the word mindset. I know it's kind of it's thrown around so much these days. I nearly cringe myself when I say it too. Like, but people can relate to that word and they kind of realize that it's something to do with goal setting or outlook or whatnot. And even if I throw out like a blog around that topic or something like that, people almost are quick to bash me on it, saying, "What are you doing? You're not a counselor," or something like that. Like, but I think I went through that journey of when I opened Doc Fitness and even had my own, let's say, transformational results without even thinking about it and knowing it. I went through that process as well of overcoming adversity and, viewing things not as a failure but as a learning curve to move forward. And I love the fact that you said you're reading all those books, because I'm in a massive phase at the moment that I'm obsessed with Marcus Aurelius and the Stoic Philosophy, all that kind of stuff as well. And I literally just finished reading Ryan Holiday's book Ego is the Enemy about a month back, so it's cool that you brought that up. But yeah, look, long story short, that is, I think, as well tied into fucking everything, to be brutal.
Yeah, but see, I think just going back to what you said about like the mindset thing, and the reason why I tend to stay away from like motivational quotes and stuff and all this like, fitspiration and all that stuff is because it's not how motivation works. Like these people who are putting quotes on the internet, like, feel good, flowery messages with like shredded abs or some chick in a really seductive position, whatever the case is, it's like, this isn't how motivation works. Like, and this has actually, a lot of this has been inspired by Jordan Peterson, who has some of the best YouTube videos on psychology, mythology, and like human behavior and development that I've ever seen. And he says like, one of his sort of whole things is that happiness is not the point. Like we're living in this time where everyone thinks, oh, you should just be happy. And it's like, no, that's not the point to anything. Like happiness is not the point. And the thing is, a lot of these people who are always espousing these like, super positive messages, like you can do everything and you can be anything and you're never going to fail and life will be awesome. It's like, no, you're fucking wrong, because you are going to fail. Maybe you can't do what you're doing right now. And trust me, it's going to be fucking hard, but that's exactly why you should do it. Because, and again, as Jordan Peterson said, and this stems from what Carl Jung said, that what you most want lies where you least want to look. And this is exactly why, if you look at hero mythology, any superhero story, or even any story which has like a prominent hero, from Harry Potter to Marvel movies, to even, like religious stories, you'll note that the hero has to go and face the dragon. Like the Hobbit, for example, it's like he literally has to face the dragon to get the gold. And that's basically the whole point of what that, and that's what motivation really is. It's like, look, you have to understand that when you're on your journey, what you most want, if you want fat loss, you're going to have to overcome certain things. And some of these things, the dragons, the proverbial dragons in that sense will be things like bad habits, changing behaviors, having to suffer a little bit, some hunger, having to overcome some bad behaviors that you've sort of garnered over the years. And it's like, those are your like proverbial dragons in that sort of, your quest to like achieve fat loss. So when people post all these like, super flowery, motivational, happy quotes, it's like, that isn't what fat loss is. That's not how any of this stuff works. Like, it's going to be hard. And I wrote about this in an article last year called 7 Unsexy Fat Loss Truths, where I was basically like, look, everything that you see and hear about fat loss is marketed as like this really sexy thing. And it's like, yeah, sure. When you get the abs and you get lean and you lose fat, or you gain muscle, that whole like process and that end goal, the end sort of product of that is sexy. It's a very sexy thing, sure. But that only makes up like a very small modicum of the whole process. Like the majority of that process is not sexy at all. Like you're going to have to eat less food. You're going to be hungry. You're going to be tired sometimes. You're going to, fail, and you're going to mess up on your diet sometimes. And a lot of those failures and like the bad things are going to outweigh the good thing, the good part of the process. And that's exactly the way that it should be.
Okay. And what would you put that down to, Adam? Would you say that's like, if you were to flip that in its head and say, okay, this is how motivation works. Number one, you have to be aware of the shit you're going to go through. Is that what you're saying?
The thing with motivation is it's so much more complex. It's not as simple as like what a lot of, it's not, yeah. It can't be distilled into like an Instagram meme. So it's like, that's the issue with it. I mean, like motivation is such a complicated thing, but what we do know is that there's 3 tenets to motivation. The first is autonomy. So the person has to have a choice in what they're doing. And secondly, they need to have purpose. So there needs to be a reason why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, it's like why people just stop doing it. And thirdly, it's mastery. So there needs to be, you need to pick a thing which is just hard enough for you to be able to feel good as you're mastering that process, but not so hard that you become demotivated. So that's why it's so hard to like distill all of these things into just like one inspirational meme, because, it's like, that's not how this stuff works. But with motivation, the main thing is that, you can't just read a meme or, a lot of times when people come to me for coaching, like I'm lacking motivation. And it's always like, well, if you expect me to be able to motivate you or hold your hand, I can't do that, because you can't really motivate someone else. And this is also why I have issue with like the word empowerment, because the only way you can empower someone is if they're your slave. It's like to empower someone means that you have power over them. So when people on like Instagram and social media saying, I'm empowering you and I'm empowering these people, it's like, no, you're not, because you can't empower someone. And unless someone wants to do something, you can't motivate that person to do it. So that's why when it comes to motivation, it's like, you have to pick something that you want to do, that you enjoy doing, because if it's something that you don't want to do, you don't enjoy doing, chances are that you're never going to do it. But sorry, going back to your point, because I went a bit of a tangent there, but going back to your point, yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that people should be more concerned about all the things that can go wrong. And, I've written about this several times before, but every time I have a client who comes to me, I always ask them, okay, what I want you to do is imagine that you failed your fitness goal. Like you've actually failed. Not that you could fail, but you have failed. And, think of all the things that would have caused that to happen. And then then they'll say things like, well, I left, like I binged on like Oreos or some tasty food that I left in the house. It's like, cool, get rid of that house, get rid of the temptation. And then they'll be like, I came back from work and I was tired and I couldn't be bothered to go to the gym. Okay, so how can you set up your day so that you can make it to the gym, or so that you make the barrier to go into the gym a lot easier? So it's always good to think about things in like from the inverse point of view. And so to put this into another way, sometimes people come to me and be like, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds. What can I do? And I always say to them, what can you do to not gain another 30 pounds? And when you say this to people, they tend to just stop and think. And it's actually quite surprising, because if you ever try this yourself, you'll see the answers and they'll be like, well, maybe I could eat a bit better. Maybe I could eat a bit more fruits and vegetables. Maybe I could, go to the gym a bit more. Maybe, whatever the case is. And so it just stops and gets people to think about what they can do. So I've always found it to be, instead of thinking about all the things that you should do, think about all the things that you shouldn't do, or or to put it in another way, instead of thinking about, how to improve the situation, how can you stop the situation from becoming worse? And it just stops, and it stops and makes people think about, some of the things they can do. And it's surprising how people think about these things, because when you place a question like that, a lot of the times you're going to see that people actually know what they need to do. So And it's not so. A lot of the time, people aren't really looking for you to tell them what to do. It's just to be like, yeah, that's exactly what you need to do. So just go do it. But that's something that I found to be helpful.
Yeah, like it's something that's funny you brought that up, because every Thursday of the last few Thursday mornings, myself and the coaches here, we've been doing like a coaches education morning where, like, over the past week, we're taking our main takeaway from our own learnings and we're just sharing it with the coaches, so we're all on the one page with things and picking up on things we mightn't have seen, and also getting different perspectives on the same topic. And a lot of that is like what you're doing there in their head is you're flipping the same situation, probably the same question, but flipping it a different perspective for them. So now they're starting to believe, Jesus, I can do this, or I can make that small little change. And with psychology 101, when somebody believes in their head that they can make that change, they can see themselves doing it, it's much more likely to stick. And I think you probably know that already, though. But I think we went through a lot there before. I had a lot of those kind of stuff wanting to touch on as we went out, so I'm happy that we started off with that. But Adam, you wrote a great blog recently as well on just fat loss expectations versus reality. And I know we've already touched on a bit, but I suppose one question that I want to get is, because we're on the topic of motivation right now, like, if I was 30% body fat or whatever it is, 3 or 4 stone overweight, and I want to get back to my former self, I want to get back to when I was in my 20s, whatever it is, for a wedding next year, my friend's wedding, will I be happier that wedding day compared to where I'm at now, or is that a false logic?
So that's an interesting question. And basically, so what happens is, it's a cognitive bias called projection bias. And essentially what happens is, how you feel in the moment. So if if you're overweight right now and you start thinking about how you're going to feel when you have abs, you're essentially projecting your present feelings into your future self. And because there's a bit of a gap between how you feel right now and how you're going to feel when you get to that future self, it's completely different. But you don't, I think sometimes they call it the projection bias, sometimes they call it the present bias. But essentially it's the same thing. It just means that we tend to project how we feel right now into how we're going to feel in the future. To give you another example, and everyone's done this, there's like at Christmas or Thanksgiving or any time or any sort of celebration where there's been a lot of food, people always be like, they'll eat so much food, and then when they start to feel sick, they'll be like, I'm never eating this much again. But then the next, not even then at the next Christmas, it's like an hour or 2 hours later, you're back in the fridge looking for food, right? And that's basically what it is, because the discomfort you feel when you're stuffed and you're feeling sick, you're projecting that feeling into the future, and you're like, I can never eat this much food again, or I can never eat this much chocolate, or whatever the case is. So the same thing happens with people's sort of happiness in terms of like what they feel like will happen, because everything that they feel right now, and a lot of it is just their imagination blows everything out of perspective. So they expect that how they're going to feel when they have abs is going to be exactly how they feel when they don't have abs. And because there's a bit of, because your imagination tends to blow things out of perspective, you're actually because you're thinking about all the great things that will happen, you tend to project a lot of that into the future. But then when you get to that point where you've got the abs, you realize that you're not actually that much happier. And the reason for that is because, it's called a hedonic treadmill. So everyone has a genetic limit to the levels of happiness. And a lot of this is, Dan Gilbert spoke about in his book, Stumbling on Happiness, which is it's an amazing book, and I highly recommend people read it if they're interested. But, so the hedonic treadmill is basically everyone has like a predetermined level of happiness, and there are some things that can increase your happiness, but a lot of the time after you've achieved a certain goal or a certain level of money or whatever it is, you get a small spike in happiness, but then eventually that happiness returns back to the baseline. And this is why, when you see people who have I think there's a study that showed that people who have there's no difference between someone who has, I think, 200K and someone who has 200 million, because after I think it's after 70 or 80K, in terms of monetary value, people's happiness doesn't really matter anymore. So after you've sort of covered all your basics, once you have food, once you have a house, so you're safe, you've got security, you've got food to eat. Once you've got those basic necessities down, everything else is just like sprinkles on top. And though they don't really affect your happiness that much. And a lot of the times what happens is people will get the abs, and don't get me wrong, I mean, abs will definitely, improve your happiness level to an extent. But the level that it happens isn't as much as what people think it will be. Like your life won't change that much, and eventually you get used to that sort of, that new level of body fat or whatever the case is, and you realize that you're not as any happier than what you were when you were overweight, or maybe there was a bit of, maybe you're a bit more happier, but not to the level that you would have thought you'd be.
When you look at the macro view of that, they probably would be a bit happier themselves because they've learned so much about themselves along the way, and they're just they're probably more self-aware, and now they're setting goals and they're actually working towards a purpose, whereas before they didn't. So if you factor that in, you could probably say yes, you will be, but I think it's a flawed logic to say I will be happier when I get X, Y, or Z, because you're always chasing it then, aren't you? Like you're never going to get to that destination. And I think, I don't know where I read it years ago, but it was like a big kick for me initially. It was like, what you have right now is more than you need. Like you have everything you need, and if you can't kind of at least get somewhat comfortable and happy with that, you're fooling yourself going forward, because you'll never be fucking happy,
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to what you said, obviously, if someone's like 30% body fat and then they cut down and they're down to like 10% body fat, they're obviously going to be a lot more happier than someone who's like 10% body fat and or 15% body fat and diets down to like 10% body fat. So there's always going to be, exceptions to that. And it just goes back to like the monetary thing. Like if you're someone who's living in poverty right now, the minute you get to a level of some level of financial stability where you've got enough money to cover your bases, you're going to be a lot happier than when you were in poverty. But I think it's like there's a point of diminishing returns. So yeah, so that's basically, there's definitely going to be some interdependent variances, but it isn't as much as people think it is. Okay.
We have dived into some motivational stuff and happiness stuff. It sounds like a very sappy start to a podcast. But no, seriously, from here, Adam, I think we'll change course a small bit, and we'll dive into some meat and bones and some different style of takeaways around, like I think it was episode 3. I had Danny Lennon on and we talked about creating a calorie deficit to drop body fat. So we're not going to touch over that again. We don't need to. If people want to find out more about that, they can go back to episode 3. But let's just pretend I am doing everything I need to do to drop body fat. I'm in a calorie deficit. I'm training, lifting weights 3 or 4 times a week. I'm highly active. I think I am highly active on my days where I'm not training, and I might get out for a run or some bodyweight circuits throughout the week as well. So realistically, I could be training anywhere from 3 to 6 days a week if you want to look at it like that. But I'm not losing fat. Like, where do I even start? What could be a play, and what can we do about it, I suppose?
So there's quite a few things that you could do, and I as you know, I wrote about this in the blog. But the first thing that I see when people aren't losing fat or their weight hasn't moved for a little while is just patience. Like, how long have you been actually dieting for? And I mean like actually dieting, not like dieting for like 3-4 days and then just falling off and binging or just having like cheat days. It's just like, how long have you been consistently in a deficit? And if you haven't been in a deficit for like 4 to 5 weeks, then, firstly, don't even worry about changing anything. Like, you just need to stay in a deficit. And so I think that's the biggest thing. It's like a lack of patience, because people think that, fat loss is just, they're going to start eating fewer calories and that's it. Like, the fat will just start dropping off, but it just never works like that.
Yeah. And I suppose you could probably tie in, sorry for cutting you off, Adam, but consistency and adherence and patience probably all come under the one bracket, do they?
Sure. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, so firstly, how long have you been dieting for? 4 weeks. Okay. Have you been consistent? Have you been eating in a calorie deficit, training hard, for the same amount of time? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. And then it's like, in terms of like adherence, how sort of diligently have you been, tracking your macros or keeping tabs on your calorie intake? you know, how it's not like, because sometimes people tend to just forget. They'll be like, I'm doing everything well, and then they completely forget, like, the Saturday they went out and just got totally smashed and just, you know, went over their calories by like 3,000 to 4,000. So it's like, so if you've got all of those ticked off, then you can start talking about the other sort of things that go on. But the number one thing is just a lack of patience that I see with a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we're the exact same. And the funny thing about that is when they do get consistent, like, the other stuff doesn't even come into play for months down the line. Well, that's usually what we find. It's just, I don't know what it's like with your guys over there, but like anybody here, yeah, what you just said about going on a night out and then the following day they'll have chicken rolls and cans of Coke and Chinese takeaways, and they're still wondering why they're coming in the next week, why they're not down, or why they're the same. So patience, adherence, consistency is massive.
Yeah, it's always like, people always like, sometimes I have clients who'll be like, hey man, so I've been dieting for like 5 days now, when do I get my first cheat day or my first cheat meal? I'm like, listen, you've been cheating your whole life. Like, calm, like, you're not getting any cheat meals right now. And then they're like, oh, but I thought that my metabolism, no, your metabolism's fine. Like, trust me, you've got enough fat on you you're fine. Don't worry. Yes, that's one of the things I always, people like, and that's always a bit of a red flag for me, because it's like, if they're doing that, if they're not dropping weight, I'm like, are you sure you're telling me the truth and you're not actually cheating on the diet and stuff?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I think I've recently, like, some of my guys too online, like, because I don't see them face to face in the gym like we do our guys here, we could see them 4 times a week. A lot of that too is breaking down the barrier, like, who are you bullshitting here? Are you bullshitting me or are you bullshitting yourself? And then once they kind of realise that, they tend to move forward a bit more. But that's kind of going back to the way we started off this podcast. I don't want to loop back into that. But just a quick one on cheat meals, cheat days. How do you view them yourself?
I haven't got a problem with them. I think it just depends on the client. And like, as I say, the psychology of dieting is more important than the physiology of dieting. So yes, we know that 1 day of high calorie intake isn't going to, you know, increase like leptin levels and reverse all the symptoms that come by way of extended deficits. But if that helps someone adhere to the diet for longer and the deficit for the next week, then sure, I'm all for someone having a cheat day or a cheat meal, but it will be controlled. So I'll set some parameters so that we can keep the calories reined in to a certain degree. But I'm not as stringent as other coaches, like, oh bro, PubMed says this. I really don't care, because what a study might say is completely different to when you're dealing with real people. And a big part of real people is the psychology of that person. So if I have clients who will say to me, look, I'm more than happy to be in a pretty aggressive deficit during the week, as long as I can have 1 or 2 days during the weekend where I can have higher calories. And I'm like, sure, we can do that. And yeah, so I mean, I'm totally fine with people having higher calorie days.
Yeah, and we're the exact same, but I think what I like to do is, or what we like to do is, we never even mention the word cheat, simply because we don't want them to make them think that even though they're in a calorie deficit and they might be doing everything, we'll say, great, and they're changing habits for the better, if we find that, oh, my cheat day is coming up, my cheat meal is coming up, I just find that it's still putting that negative spin on nutrition as a whole. And even though it's the exact same thing as eating more food, and maybe that more food might be a pizza, it might be X, Y, or Z, it might be more chocolate or more popcorn, you know, whatever it is, it's the same thing, only that we're not using the word cheat day. Like, so we use very, very simple terms like saving calories throughout the week and spending them in the weekend. Saving calories throughout the week so you can spend them in a midweek meal with family and friends, whatever. But again, it's the same thing. And as you said, it's more of the psychological benefits that's going to have. And I think knowing at the end of the tunnel, at the end of a week or even midweek for people, there's a little light there that kind of gets them to the next block, to the next block, to the next block. Because,
yeah, exactly.
You know, whether you want to admit it or not, and like we try and portray like, oh, fat loss is easy, getting shredded is easy. For 90% of the people that we coach, it's not. And
yeah, and that's why I've never beat it around the bush. Like, I've never said that fat loss is going to be easy. Like, if anything, I've always said, look, fat loss is really hard. Like, you know, you have to have that, you have to know that it's hard, because right now what everyone talks about is just effortless fat loss and how easy fat loss is going to be and all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's the complete opposite of that. It's damn hard. And if you're not ready for that, then you're going to fail. So you need to be aware of how hard it is, so that you can put those measures in place from the get-go, so that you can stick to the diet and the deficit, with some realistic expectations.
Yeah, because once you expect things is going to be hard, once you expect, we'll say, things like hunger, expect days where you're going to be low on energy, expect days where you just want to eat the fucking world, expect days where, how can I put it? Well, I've already said it really. Expect the hard days. Then you can start looking in advance and planning your days in advance, planning your weeks in advance. And that's when you can kind of get into like tactics and stuff and stuff that works for you on a typical day. And, you know, then you can break it down to fucking how your day goes in terms of hours and when you're going to eat certain foods and whatnot. So, but again, I think people get so blinded by the fact that, is it okay if I eat should I eat breakfast or should I not eat breakfast? Should I have this meal then? Is it okay eating late at night? You know, they get hung up on just the minority details.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't blame them because, like, it's like, it's easy for someone like myself to say because I've been in the industry, I've done all the research and whatever, but, you know, for someone who's just coming into the industry, there's so much shit that's out there and it's so conflicting. It's hard to know who to believe and who not to believe and what to believe and what to do. So I definitely feel that it can be confusing.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, which is why when you tell people that, look, this is all you need to do. You just need to eat a bit less. You need to strength train and you don't have to kill yourself, you know, with all this other juice cleansing and stuff that you see. People are kind of dubious about it because, like, there's no way that it can be, I mean, not easy, but it's not as hard as what I would have thought it would be. It's like, no, that's really what you need to do.
What if, though, Adam, we are doing everything right. We are consistent for those 4 to 5 weeks. What could be at play if we're not, we'll say, dropping fat?
So yeah, I mean, like fat loss plateaus are going to happen, and one of the biggest reasons for that is just the metabolic adaptation, not metabolic damage. Like you haven't damaged your metabolism. It's simply that So when we talk about the metabolism or energy expenditure, so obviously you have the calories in, which is how much food you're eating, and then you have the calories out. And a lot of the times when people's fat loss plateaus, it's the calories out part of the equation that tends to sort of, quote unquote, down regulate. And so when we speak about the metabolism, we obviously refer to it as one sort of entity, but we can actually separate it into 4 separate component parts. So the first part is obviously your BMR, your base metabolic rate. And this is, all the stuff that basically, if you laid in bed all day and didn't do anything, it's the amount of calories you essentially need to just survive and, all the sort of basic bodily functions that your body needs to carry out. Those are the amount of calories you need. And a big indicator of your BMR, your BMR is predicated on your body size. So someone who's got more muscle mass, is taller, weighs more, has more body fat even, is going to have a faster metabolism, or a higher basal metabolic rate than someone who's smaller, has less muscle mass, weighs a lot less, is shorter, which is why on average men tend to need more calories than women do. And as you start to diet down, you get leaner because there's less of you now. Your BMR does decrease. So that's why, say if you needed, 2,500 calories when you first started your diet to start losing fat, when you dieted down, say about a month or 2 months down, and you're now, say, 160 pounds, if you've dropped 20 pounds of fat, then you're obviously going to need fewer calories now than when you were heavier. So that's a big part that comes into it as well. And the second second component of that is people just move around less. So, what we call non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. And, that can account up to 1,000 calories to some people. Some people are really active or really fidgety. People don't actually understand how many calories we burn just from like all this activity that isn't, explicit physical activity. So because as calories start to get lower, you're going to be more lethargic, your energy is going to drop. So instead of walking everywhere, you might take the bus, instead of taking the stairs, you're going to take the elevator. You're going to sit down more. You might not fidget as much. So you've just cut your calorie expenditure a lot from there as well. And then you have the third and the fourth components, which is EAT. So exercise activity thermogenesis, which is essentially all the activity you're doing, like intentional exercise. So if it's strength training, cardio, if you play a sport, obviously a smaller person's going to burn fewer calories. So that automatically is going to cut your energy expenditure down as well. And then the final one is TEF, or thermic effect of food, which is essentially the amount of calories you burn just through digestion. And because you're consuming fewer calories now, your energy expenditure is going to be changed through that as well. So fat loss essentially impacts all of these to some degree, as I outlined. And that's a big reason why people tend to, they think they're eating in a calorie deficit, but even though they may be eating in a calorie deficit, their calorie expenditure's changed. They're smaller now, so they're burning fewer calories. And this is why obviously you need to adjust your calorie intake to take into account your new body weight now.
Yeah, so is that what we would do? Would we adjust the calorie intake? Would you adjust the output? What do you usually tend to do with that?
It depends on the client. Yeah. For example, if I have like a 130-pound female who's consuming 1,300 calories a day, I might not cut her calories down anymore, because it's like, how low can she actually go? Especially if she's not looking to compete or anything. Yeah. So in that case, it might just be a case of, if she was doing 8,000 steps a day, I might say, hey, look, try and aim for 10,000 steps or 12,000 steps a day now. Or maybe it might just be a case of increasing their cardio. So add in, 300 to 400 calories worth of cardio a week, and then just adjust it from there. Obviously if I have a guy who's like dieting on 2,600 calories, they've got a lot more room to play with, in terms of like just their food. So I'm not very stringent with, this is exactly what I need to do. It just depends on the client. And it just comes down to tweaking the diet and just seeing how the body responds and changing it, So I like to go by biofeedback as opposed to like arbitrary reasons. So making a small adjustment, seeing how the client responds, again, psychologically, physiologically, and then making adjustments based on that.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to realize now as well, even after this episode 7 of the podcast as well, like nearly every answer always comes back to, it depends. It depends on you, it depends on your situation, depends on a lot of factors really. So there's no set answer. So if you're asking myself or Adam a private message on Instagram in the future, just be aware of that.
I think my friend Nick Sorrell, he made a great point about this. He said, yeah, sure, it depends, it's cool, but you can still give a person an answer. The only reason I can't give a person an answer on a podcast is because there's not anyone to
asking.
Right. So if I had someone message me and say, hey, I weigh 140 pounds, I'm doing strength training 3 times a week, I'm doing, 10,000 steps a day, my fat loss is stalled, what can I do? Then I can give them a better idea of what they should do. So I think it depends, obviously it depends, but I don't think that should be a reason for a coach to not give a person an answer, just because they're not paying them or whatever the case is. So every time someone messages me and says, hey, look, I weigh X amount, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, my nutrition is this, my fat loss is stalled, then I've got something to work with and I can ask them some more questions and point them in the right direction so they can start making changes. It just, again, I think it depends on context and, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what I meant to say was maybe be more specific with your questions.
Yeah, like sometimes people just be like, hey, I can't lose fat anymore. It's like, okay, so cool. Sorry for your lots, but I can't do anything because you haven't given me any information. So yeah, it's like if you're going to answer me a question, at least be a bit more specific. Like just be like, hey, I can't lose fat anymore. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Well, I can't help you because you haven't given me any information to work with. I hope
at least 5 people now ask you the most broadest question ever after listening to the podcast.
Right.
Okay, so what if we are doing everything right and we think we're not because it's masked by water retention?
Sure.
Yeah. What the fuck do we do now?
Yeah. So water retention's a big one, and it's one of the biggest reasons why people feel like they're not losing fat because and I put up the picture in that article of a female client, and if you saw those images sort of side by side, you can tell how water retention can really fuck with someone's head, especially if someone's female, because they tend to see crazy fluctuations in weight, especially due to that menstrual cycle. But it can actually look like, if you're retaining water, it does look like you've gained fat or you're not losing fat. And the minute that water retention dissipates, you see that you actually look a lot leaner. So it can look like you've just lost fat overnight. But a lot of the times, because dieting is a stress, eating fewer calories, still training hard, add that into all the other stress that you have in your life, like your job, college, work, kids, whatever the case is, it all can lead to the body storing a lot of water as the stress hormone cortisol increases. And a lot of the time, that is the biggest reason that people are just simply not losing fat in a calorie deficit, or sometimes they think they're gaining weight, and that's when they start to think they've damaged the metabolism. But that's not the case at all. The thing with water retention is that it's a bit of an insidious cycle, because the minute someone retains water and they don't know what's going on, they start to freak out more, and they start to slash calories, or they cut calories, they start doing more cardio to try and, get rid of the fat that they've gained, quote unquote fat. And then that all just increases stress, which increases cortisol, and it makes them hold even more water. And it turns into this really nasty cycle. And that's where you start to see people saying things like, I'm eating in a deficit, I'm not losing any calories, I'm not losing any fat. And it's like, cool, you're just retaining water. So then when you tell them to just calm down, to start reducing their stress levels, the water retention dissipates, and then they start to see that they actually, they have lost fat. It's just that they was being masked by water.
Cool. What you said, they might go one way. They might go doing extra work, but they also might go the other way too, of the fuck this mentality, and then end up completely undoing what they've actually done, and then potentially gain fat over the next week or two because they thought that they've already gained it from just simple water retention. So I just wanted to throw that point in there as well. But yeah, what factors are at play when water retention may be there?
In terms of
what could add, stress, etc. What could add to
anything? I mean, firstly, for females, the menstrual cycle is always during the cycle they're gonna retain water. They're gonna have bloat. In terms of so what people have to understand is that there's not separate buckets to quote to proverbial buckets where different levels of stress are thrown into. The body just looks at any stress as just one entity. So it could be stress from training, it could be stress from eating a deficit, it could be stress from not getting enough sleep, it could be stress from your boss having a go at you because you didn't do the job, whether the job was properly, or your kids driving you insane, or your exams coming up and you're stressing out over that. So it's all these little things can all add in to stress. And then if you're already stressed out, if you've got exams coming up and now you're trying to diet down to 8% body fat and do a bodybuilding competition and trying to hit a new PR in your squat or your bench, all of these things are going to impact the total amount of stress your body is experiencing, which is only going to make things worse. So I always tell people, look, if you're going for a really stressful time, in terms of your social life, your personal life, whatever, just your diet and training should facilitate for that. So you shouldn't be doing anything which is too strenuous, which is going to increase that. Maybe you should just not, maybe just maintain your current body fat levels, or just go into maintenance intake until this stressful period is over. And that tends to help a lot as well. But I mean, any sort of little things can always add to total body stress.
Yeah, that's why taking a break from things works so well, as well. And that's why when people come back from holidays, sometimes, I know people are always on about, they gain weight in holidays, but sometimes people come back from holidays and they might even look leaner, healthier, happier, fresher, so stepping back to go forward is a big factor of that too. And, but I think, Adam, before I go diving into more stuff, I think we have a ton of stuff covered there, because with some great takeaways around some adversity stuff, motivational stuff, and I'm going to link up all those books we talked about. I mean, you mentioned a few names in there as well. I might get a few of them after you in an email if I'm unsure of them, but yeah, I think there's a ton of info there, there's a ton of takeaways there. So we'll start rounding this up a bit, but I want to ask you as well, what current book are you reading, and then why?
So at the moment I was reading, let me just grab it, The Pleasures of Reading in an Age of Distraction, by Alan Jacobs. And I'm also reading It's called You May Also Like Taste in an Age of Endless Choice by Tom Vanderbilt. And those are sort of like non-fiction books. And the fiction book that I'm reading currently is The Kind That Deserves Killing. It's like a thriller.
And why do you juggle two non and one fiction? Is it just to break it up, like, or?
I personally feel that everyone should read more fiction because, you know, it's just awesome. Like, who doesn't love reading a good story? So I always read fiction personally because I feel that the fiction side of things is more to just help me as a writer to become better. And then in terms of, I mean, at one time I could be reading 3 to 4 books just because I have like ADHD and I tend to just I'll be reading like one psychology book, maybe one philosophy book, one, fiction book. So I just kind of flip between them. And anytime I get a little break, I'll just like dive into them, and just read a few pages and then, yeah.
I probably know the answer to this already, but if you weren't coaching people online in the fitness world, what would you like to give a shot to?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's probably what I don't know. Actually, I don't know. It's weird because when I was growing up and stuff, I actually wanted to be a comic book artist, and yeah, then eventually I just fell out of love with it, which is ironic because I'm doing that now, like in my articles, which was actually a suggestion from a friend. She was like, "Yo, you should put more of your illustrations into your articles." And I sort of did it. I'd had some illustrations here and there in my previous articles, but then my last one that I did, I just decided to. Well, the fat loss expectations versus reality, that was like an experiment which went down really well, which was just purely, I just kept it heavy on the illustrations and the text was minimal. And then my 8 reasons you're not losing fat was where I actually used that a lot. And for some reason, people really enjoy the illustrations. I guess it just breaks up the monotony of just reading text, like a wall of text. So, I personally feel like it just makes it more entertaining. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would want to be a cartoonist. I'd probably want to be an author or something. Which is, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I probably would want to be like a comic book artist or something.
Yeah, no, back to the blog, from my perspective, definitely way easier to read. And it's something that I used to write a lot of blogs. Probably last year I kind of started slacking a bit the busier we got here, but I loved doing them. But then I love more getting into shorter style blogs. But then it's hard to get across your point when you're trying to cram it into a smaller style, and then adding more graphics. The feedback alone just proves that you need to do more, because it makes people see and put things into context a bit better. And the way people read things and digest things these days as well, you wouldn't know where they'd be reading that blog. I mean, 100%. The reason why I actually started to put illustrations in is because when I'm thinking of a really complex idea, I tend to just illustrate it some way. So even if it's like a little short comic strip, or if it's like a graph, something that basically helps people understand the concept a lot better. And then I'm like, cool, if it helps me understand like something really complex and makes it, firstly entertaining, enjoyable to read, but more importantly, it helps the message come across better, then why not? Like, why would I want to write a paragraph of text if I can explain that same concept via a graph or a pie chart or a comic strip, which just makes the whole reading experience that much more enjoyable. Yeah. And more of the story as well, guys, is I'm just going to link up those blogs here so you can go away and read them. But they come highly recommended because the level of information in them is obviously second to none, but the graphics they're brilliant to get across the point. So
thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I'll throw those in the show notes as well. Now, Adam, I always round up every podcast with one main question, and that's, we're getting nearly halfway through this year already, but like it's probably backtracking a bit in your own head, but what was, or it could be is, your biggest lesson from 2016?
In what?
As in any relevant, what would be, what stands out most in your head? Like your biggest kind of takeaway from last year or such?
I would say just being myself, man. Like, so in 2016, I wrote the article, "You're not losing fat because you're eating too damn much." And that went down really well with people. And the number one feedback that I had from that was, I love the fact that you were not afraid to swear in it. We love the fact that you weren't afraid to just, throw some humor in there and be funny at times, like as opposed to the majority of fitness blogs, which are just super serious, super sciencey. And so, yeah, I think that my biggest takeaway was just being myself and just wanting to write and create things that I personally would want to read and look at and like read or consume. So that's essentially what I just do now with everything. Like every time I'm writing content, or I'm, making a post for like Instagram, whatever the case is, it's always like, okay, is this something that I personally would want to enjoy? Is this something that personally it would make me laugh, or make me want to click like? And if it is, then I feel that I'm on the right path and I post it. That was my biggest lesson. Like just be yourself and just do what you personally, create things that you personally would want to consume.
Okay, cool. So being yourself though is the main takeaway.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you find like you weren't portraying yourself before that, like, or?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I would say I wasn't portraying myself, because I've always,
you always are.
But I feel that sometimes you can be like, I'm not sure if I should do this because it hasn't been done before in the fitness world. I'm not sure if this will work. Like the illustrations and stuff, like, it's like, I don't know, man, it's a bit childish. I don't know if people are going to resonate with it well. Like the article where I posted the expectations, which was just purely illustration, that was like just a massive gamble for me because I didn't know how people would respond to it. But fortunately everyone loved it and they loved the fact that it was illustrated and stuff. And so from there, it was just a bit of it just affirmed what I already knew that.
Yeah, no, because I think, was it 3.5 years ago, I actually started writing a daily email, and it was just literally what was on my head that day, trying to cope it around training, mindset, nutrition, and they ended up being more mindset based, if I'm honest, rather than the more specific training and nutrition stuff. But then, whenever I had blogs and videos, I would share them with the readers as well. And I did that for 3 years solid, and then I kind of, as I got busier in here, I questioned, should I keep them up? And I kind of questioned everything around them, and then I stopped doing them. But I mainly stopped doing them thinking in my head, people don't want to read emails from me throughout the week. And it held me back for a small while with it, but last year I kind of perked back up again, and now I write 2 to 3 a week, more at the end of the week, like a roundup email, but then Monday and maybe Wednesday, depends on how my mood is, to be honest. Maybe Wednesday I might pop out 2, like just any style email, Monday, Wednesday, and then Friday like a roundup email. But again, that's just because I want to do that and I really like that. But the people now that read them and digest them, they actually really enjoy to be there, and I judge that by the emails I get back and the feedback from it. So no, I'm with you on that one 100%.
Yeah, like, everyone, a year or two ago, someone made a comment about how long form content's dead, like no one wants to read long form anymore. I remember when I first started writing Physique Economics, like my content tends to be quite long form, like it isn't, short form at all. And people are like, look, no one wants to read long content anymore. Like everyone wants to watch YouTube videos, so there's no point in blogging and this and that. And Tim Ferriss actually said a great thing. He said, look, it's not, long form content isn't dead. Like if long form content was dead, books wouldn't exist anymore. So people still want long form content. The difference is shit long form content's dying. Like the clickbait, really poor written content is, or, just stuff that doesn't provide any value. That's the stuff that's dying out. The good stuff is still on the rise. And actually, if you look at the statistics, long form content, is still some of the best performing content in terms of like what gets the most shares on our Facebook and stuff. So yeah, that's why I always tell people, look, I don't know what someone else wants to read, but I know what I want to read. And I know that if I want to read something, there's going to be some people out there who want to read that same thing. And they're the people who are going to consume whatever I write, basically.
Yeah. And it's not going to stop you in the future from putting out more content. And
right.
That's it's doing what you fucking love, isn't it, really, to be honest? Yeah, cool. Where can we find out more?
So, there's 3 places really. My main website where I post a lot of the long form content, at physiqueeconomics.com. And then Facebook is more sort of short tidbits of anything I'm thinking about, and more sort of short to medium length content. That's just facebook.com/physiqueeconomics. And then Instagram, which I'm not. I mean, I've started to become more active on it now. But yeah, I mean, if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's instagram.com/physiquenomics.
Cool. No, I'll put all those in the show notes, anyways. And yeah, what books did we mention again just to round it off? You mentioned, was it Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, Jordan Peterson. His lectures he does a lot of like lectures on YouTube. So if you just type in Jordan Peterson onto YouTube, he'll come up. He's pretty popular right now. And his 2 lectures. One is Maps of Meaning. I think it's like 12 parts. They're like an hour to 2 hours long, but it's just really amazing stuff. And the other one is the personality. I think it's like Transformations of Personality, which is just really amazing content as well.
And you mentioned Marcus Aurelius and Ryan Holiday's books were definitely in there, weren't they?
Yeah, Ryan Holiday's. If you're someone who's looking for like an intro to Stoicism or like philosophy in general, Ryan Holiday's The Obstacles, the Way is a really good entry point. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, that's like a classic, everyone quotes that. Seneca, Letters from a Stoic is another really good one. Epictetus has a few different ones, but there's a very sort of like a simple translated text which is called The Art of Living or something. It's been written by this English lecturer from, I think, Cambridge or somewhere, but she's basically translated a lot of all of his texts basically, and made it into like really user-friendly, readable sort of format.
Yeah, because I definitely say as well, if you are, like, I love the Stoic philosophy stuff, and it's actually what my tattoos are based on as well, and I think it's come up, like Ryan Holiday and the Stoic word has come up in nearly every...
Yeah, I mean, I personally preferred Ryan Holiday's most recent book, Ego is the Enemy. I thought that was amazing.
Wasn't it? There was actually some stuff from Obstacles Away in there as well. But if you're looking to get, I think, at least started in what we're talking about here, Stoic philosophy, and just flipping your perspective on a lot of stuff, I think the Obstacles Away and Ryan Holiday's books in general are a good place to start for that. That brings us to the conclusion. And buddy, I just want to say thanks a million for coming on. We had a disaster setting up for the first 20 minutes. Skype wasn't working for me, so thanks for sticking it out, and thanks for providing some serious value for the listeners. So we shall be in touch, because I definitely will be getting you back on in the future, and hopefully you have a few more stickmen drawn by then.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thank you,
buddy. So guys, that was Adam, and I don't need to talk much here because we've already talked about where to find out more about him and the books and whatnot. And as always, it'll be over in the show notes at DocFitnessOnline/episode 7. And I suppose one thing that I want to bring up just before you go is that if you do want to get on those weekly emails I mentioned there near the end of the podcast, basically, let's say on a Monday I might pop out an email, a Wednesday sometimes I do, and then Friday I pop out like a roundup email, which is called the 4 Nugget Friday. And within that then I'm sharing like the main pieces of content with you from the week, and 2 kind of mini like nuggets of takeaway that you can kind of bring into your weekend. And the whole reason why I do those is it's nice to get those kind of daily bites or weekend bites of information, and kind of a little kind of perspective shift to keep you on track with things and move you forward. Like, that's all that's about. So if you want to get on those emails, I'll pop the link to get straight onto them over on the show notes page as well. It'll be at the end of the page if you scroll down. And you know me with future guests, they're a bit random at this stage. So as always, it's going to be surprises on next. Keep in tune with the Instagram page, mainly because that's where I kind of share who's on next and ask for questions and whatnot. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we will chat to you soon. Bye-bye.